Welcome in our friend from The Athletic. That is Mr. Ed Bouchette. Hi, Ed. How you doing?
I'm fine, Colin.
Wow.
Thank you, Chris.
Morning, Ed.
Sounds spry this morning,
Up and
Ed.
at 'em today?
Wow.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I am.
All right, good.
Sort of.
We'll work this. We want to work something specific real quick before we get kind of general. What's going to go on at safety for the Steelers? And do you think they're in on a guy like on Tyrone Mathieu at all?
They could be. But, I think their best move is to re-sign Edmonds, right? I mean, he fits them best. Hasn't signed anywhere, so he's still there.
What?
And, what?
I'm sorry. I was going to say, as far as cost effectiveness goes, I think obviously that's going to be, I would think, much less expensive than bringing in a Tyrann Mathieu. But Mathieu, I think, at least in my opinion, Ed, is the better strong safety.
Yeah, I guess he's older. They don't need to be plugging stuff like that now. They're not going to the Super Bowl next year. Bring Edmonds back and put that money somewhere else.
Where else would you go with it?
Have you looked to see if they have any wide receivers left?
I mean, isn't that something that we would count on them to address in the draft, especially early in the draft? Now that Juju's gone and it's really Johnson, Claypool, and a bunch of practice squad guys.
Well, they still need tackles too. They don't have any tackles. They don't have any. They have a bunch of old defensive linemen and some young guys who haven't, shown that they are future starters. I don't know. I don't know that they may have to get a wide receiver. They don't have it. They have two. Their next wide receiver is Cody White. He's caught 5 passes in his entire career, which was all last season.
Text us. Oh, sorry, Ed.
No, that's okay. I keep going.
Go ahead. Go with it.
Everybody's talking about the great job they're doing, and, they're leaving holes here.
They are leaving holes. Text us about it. Edgar Snyder and Associates fan text line 412-928-9370. Edgar Snyder and Associates reminds you to text responsibly. So then do you think their tack may have changed in terms of getting a wide receiver in one of their first couple picks?
I do. I mean, they almost have to unless they, pick up one of these free agents here. They could maybe plug in with that. I'm surprised they didn't re-sign Juju for that price. And Juju's not, he's not what he was several years ago, but he's a good possession receiver, and that's something they don't have. And he signed in Kansas City for half of what he got here last year.
So what does Deshaun Watson do to the balance of power in the AFC North immediately, Ed? If you look at the sports books, they've been installed as the favorite now to win the division above Cincinnati. Even the Ravens are somehow ahead of the Bengals in most of the books that I've seen. Does that make sense to you? Are the Browns the best team in the division now?
Well, I want to know what they're going to do at quarterback when he's sitting out for half the season.
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, Jacoby Brissett.
Okay, so no, they're not.
All right, fair. Well, tell me if I'm right here or not here. The Deshaun Watson trade for me is simple. NFL teams, including the one here in town, they'll do whatever it takes to win. There's just no moral high ground. And people looking for that are lost here. Every organization is about winning first. That's just the simple reality. Is that fact, Ed?
No.
Okay,
they wouldn't have touched Deshaun Watson. They would not have touched him. Wouldn't have touched him. If he came free, they wouldn't have touched him.
Really?
Wow.
No, with 22 women charging him with sex crimes. No. I'm telling you, they wouldn't have.
Is that because they didn't want to go through what they went through with Roethlisberger a dozen years ago, or do they hold? Is that apples and oranges?
It is apples and oranges. I mean, Ben was on the team already. He'd already won a Super Bowl. Already won 2 Super Bowls. He was never charged with anything. Nobody ever accused him of a crime, or a woman immediately did and then recanted. If I remember right, this is 10 years ago. And the other one out in Vegas never brought charges. She sued him, right? And he settled.
What about Harrison, though, too?
Well,
I just have a hard time measuring.
Can we do the when somebody comes up and a judge rules on a crime,
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the crimes, right? I mean, James Harrison admittedly slapped his then girlfriend, I think, who is now his wife. And that was it. He didn't have 22 women coming out and charging him with all kinds of stuff.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to do is find the threshold in which.
Well, I mean, you can go and nitpick every little thing that's happened in Steelers history. Nothing compares to what Deshaun Watson is being accused of.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Ed. I'm actually.
And that's all I'm saying. You can't go back and say, well, they let James Harrison stay on the team because, and look what he did. Well, yeah, but they're not going to invite this guy onto their team.
See,
that's all I'm saying.
I get what you're saying, Ed. I look at it from the perspective of, and we discussed this earlier, every single NFL team is going to do what's best for the team and the organization as a whole. And I think if they knew they could have Deshaun Watson for pennies on the dollar, and clearly that wasn't going to be the deal. Somebody was going to give up multiple first-round picks for him. But if it were an alternate universe where you could have Deshaun Watson without having to deal a first-round pick, I think the Steelers, to be quite honest, even though I worry about what kind of guy he is away from the facility now, I think they would be derelict of duty to not explore that option if they would have had the opportunity to do so.
I'm just telling you, you lump in 32 teams into this. There were, 3 or 4 who pursued him, and there are other teams that need quarterbacks who did not.
Fan Morning Show presented by Matt Mertz Plumbing, now part of the Armstrong Comfort Solutions family. You add him. What do you think I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows this because it seems to be unilateral from the commissioner's office. What do you think will be the suspension for Deshaun Watson?
Oh, I have no idea, but Ben got 4, and that was over a case he wasn't even charged on.
6, and then appealed down to 4, correct?
Right. Well, yeah, he got 4. You know, that's what he served. I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't.
Ed Bouchette, our Steelers.
But I would think half the season, like I mentioned, would be a start.
Ed Bouchette is our Steelers insider, and he's a Hall of Famer, and he joins us every Monday morning at 7 o'clock here on the Fan Morning Show. So let's circle back around to the offseason then, Ed, and you talked about holes needing to be filled. Presumably they have the hole of general manager to fill after the draft once Kevin Colbert decides to walk away for good. It sounds like this first round of interviews keeps getting more and more extensive. They've talked to 16 different people now about this job. When do we expect any kind of resolution to this? And should we believe that any of those 16 people not named Brandon Hunt or Omar Khan have any legitimate chance to get the job?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, I think that's why they're doing it. I don't think they're doing it for show. They don't need to do that. It sounds like the old Al Davis routine when he used to hire a coach. He'd interview 15 coaches and pick their brain. What would you do here? What would you do there? Use that information. Put it away. Gain some knowledge. But I don't know that that's what they're doing here, but it is a lot. They interviewed a lot of people when they hired Chuck Noll's replacement, who wound up being Bill Cowher. But I don't think they interviewed this many for that job. This is about 15 now, right?
Yeah, 16. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot. That's a lot of work for them. I mean, guy doesn't just come in and fill out a form and hand it in, and Art Rooney says, "Hello, my name's Art, and my name's so-and-so, and okay, we got your application."
Is that like when I got my job at the Shop and Save Deli in high school?
Yes, you just hand it to him. They said, be here on Tuesday if you can, 6 o'clock.
Right.
Ed, now we're going to put this on the back burner, Eddie Feigner, King in His Court. We're going to move that to next week. I have that one written down.
Right.
Well, because something serious. The untimely death of John Clayton. This is something that shook us all, I think, this past weekend. You've knew him for a long time. How did you find John, and how did the news hit you, Ed?
John was a pal, even after he moved out of here. And wow, he's been gone out of here for a long time. 86, I think he left. And he was actually forced out kind of at the press because they changed his job on him, and he wasn't covering the Steelers anymore. And he wanted to cover pro football, and that's what he did. He went off to Seattle to do that and found his fame and fortune. John was I've never seen anybody more enthused about a job than him. he would. I was talking to a PR man the other day, and John every Friday night would call every single PR man in the league to try and determine who was going to be on those inactive lists, who was hurt. He was trying to get the injury reports, and his job to the day he died was the second most important thing in his life, and his wife Pat was his first. But at 67, he was still like he was 17 when it came to covering pro football. He loved it, and he was a good man. He I never knew John. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink much. He could have a good time, and he was just a good friend. I mean, when he was out there before the internet and everything else, reporters used to call each other and say, "Hey, I hear the Texans, or they weren't even the Texans, and I hear the Oilers are doing this, looking at this one guy the Steelers let go, blah, blah, whatever." And John used to do that all the time. And he knew more than anybody. He'd call me and says, "Hey, the Steelers are signing this guy." And I'd get on it. He became one of my better sources across the league. And he's a reporter himself.
I had great words.
You know what? He's one of those guys also, you figure he's just always going to be there. He was just that kind of presence. I felt he was always going to be around. I'd kick off first.